Class number 9 tonight is a Baha'i view of some of the critical parts of the ministry of Christ, which is particularly important because we live in a Christian society, but also because of the fact that so much of what happens in Christianity affects what happens in Islam and what happens sequentially in the Baha'i and Baha'i faith. So if you will not only listen to what I have to say and share some of the quotes I have, but be sure and look at the handouts that I put online. I am reshaping this so that there will be more of them on the website and more of them on the YouTube channel as well. Let me begin by saying that if you go on the website, johnshatcher.com, you will see the course here, and you go down and you'll see the chronology of the life of Christ. Well, obviously that's something we cannot go into, but if you'll punch the download button there, you'll see all of the important events in the life of Christ with the various scriptures cited so that you can study it as deeply as you want. The YouTube channel doesn't presently have the PowerPoints on them. It has some of the handouts, but I'm going to change that. So I will include under each of the classes on the YouTube channel the PowerPoint that is appropriate for that class. Don't forget the scriptural references for your personal study that you'll find. They're very, very helpful. Also enjoy researching any particular points of what we're going to get into. You want to study in depth. There's so much to study and so much you can get entrenched in so much minutia that you lose sight of what we are doing, which is focused primarily on, here's some of the details. Remember that our purpose is the continuity of human spiritual progress manifest in social practices and relationships. Also, don't worry which version of the Bible you use as you do your own research. There's the King James, the New King James, the Revised Standard Version, the New International Version, which is a study Bible that I personally like very much, though most of my notes are in the Bible my mother gave me a long time ago. The Mizán, our standard by which we're looking at these sequential religions in the Abrahamic line, is the Baha'i concept of really two main concepts: progressive revelation and unity. Because religion, of course, has been the cause, as many people note, especially those who are firmly against religion because of it, has been the source of almost all of the bloodshed that has taken place in the wars of the most vehement and violent wars. And so this talk, this quote from Abdu'l-Baha from Paris Talks, I showed you last time, but we might want to look at it again as we start, because we're going to hit on tonight some of the major points that next week I will show you how they turn into some of the critical divisive points or points of division in Christianity that ultimately causes schism and tears it into thousands and thousands of sects. Let us try, says Abdu'l-Baha, with heart and soul that unity may dwell in the world, that all the peoples may become one people, and that the whole surface of the earth may be like one country. For the sun of the truth shines on all alike. All the prophets of God came for love of this one great aim. And he goes on to cite how each prophet suffered and sacrificed in order to bring about the unity of the peoples of the world. So two other quotes I want to share with you in this line that are very profound. And one of the first ones that struck me when I first became a Baha'i is this one. Religion is the outer expression of the divine reality. Therefore, it must be living, vitalized, moving, and progressive. If it be without motion and non-progressive, it is without the divine life. It is dead. And then another one similar. Religion must be conducive to love of all, the cause of fellowship, unity, and light. If it be the cause of enmity, bloodshed, and hatred, its non-being is better than its being. Its non-existence better than its existence. That's very profound. In other words, if religion is not accomplishing these simple goals, well, they're not simple, but simple to say, but hard to bring about, then they're contrary to their inherent purpose. Well, first, let's deal with the structure of the New Testament. Note in particular that very little of the New Testament, first of all, the New Testament is much, much smaller than the Old Testament. Secondly, that the New Testament consists of 4 Gospels that have the actual words of Christ. 3 of them are synoptic, as we said last time, meaning they are synonymous. They're dealing with more or less the same events in the same sequence. The 4th, the book of John, gets into other matters, more discourse about theology. But the percentage of the words in the New Testament is very small, the percentage of the words of Christ. In fact, it would take about 4 hours to read all of the words that Christ says. The book of Acts is the book that follows the 4 Gospels, is a history about what the apostles did after the death of Christ. It was probably written by Luke, who wrote the book of Luke as well. It depicts the tensions growing among some of the disciples, which becomes something we're going to focus on next time. And it focuses on what laws were still in effect, because that was a big problem is, okay, now they're Christians, they're not Jews, but are they still Jews? Do they still follow the Jewish laws? Because Christ did not abrogate all the Jewish laws by any means. In fact, the Last Supper is a commemoration of the feast of the Passover. So note in particular how many are the letters to Paul's churches in the New Testament. And I say, are these infallible? Because Paul was not one of the original disciples or apostles of Christ, the 12 apostles. He was a persecutor of the Christians. And then he had this dramatic mystical experience as he was traveling on the road from Damascus. And so you ask, is his word infallible, or his guidance to the churches authoritative? Because he has quarrels with some of the other apostles. What is the source of his authority? And note that the last book, the book of Revelations, is primarily foreshadowing and prophesying history, and primarily the history of the events leading up to and including the advent of Muhammad and Islam. And we'll see Abdul Baha's explication of those later on, the book of Revelations. This is a visual chart, and so you can see up here, you've got the 4 Gospels. And within these 4 Gospels, only a part of those are the actual words of Christ. All the rest of this, not the words of Christ. All right. Sometimes they are quoted, but these are the actual words of Christ. That is, sometimes in the letters, Paul will remind the people to whom he's writing, the churches in Corinth, the Galatia, in Ephesia, in Philippia, and so on, the various towns where there were churches. He will quote some of the teachings of Christ, but he'll also interpret them. And that's where you get into some very interesting things. And I'll just go ahead and tell you that The Catholic Church does not see Paul as infallible in one sense because of Peter being appointed the head of the church by Christ. Any rate, we'll get to that later, but you can see just what a small part of the New Testament are the actual words of Christ. Well, the first thing we come across is Christ going about gathering his disciples. And it's very touching because he picks the most unlikely of people. A simple fisherman, Peter was, who became the principal disciple. And they are obviously very much like the letters of the living. When they see Christ, they are receptive. They understand his station. And again, the next day after John stood, two of his disciples, and looking upon Jesus as he walked, he saith, Behold the Lamb of God. And the two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. Then Jesus turned and saw them following, and saith unto them, What seek ye? And they said unto him, Rabbi, which is being interpreted, Master, where does thy dwell? Where dwellest thou? He saith unto them, Come and see. And they came and saw where he dwelt, and abode with him that day, for it was about the 10th hour. One of the two which heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first findeth his own brother Simon, and saith unto him, We have found the Messiah, which is being interpreted the Christ, meaning the anointed one. And he brought him to Jesus, and when Jesus beheld him, he said, Thou art Simon, the son of Jonah. Thou shalt be called Cephas, which is by interpretation a stone, or Petra. So you have here Philip, Andrew, Peter. This is the story of Nathaniel, which is a sweet story. He said, Jesus of Nazareth, son of Joseph. And he says, Nazareth, can anything good come from there? It's such a disreputable or nothing town. And then when he saw Jesus, Jesus saw Nathanael approaching and said of him, Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. How do you know me? Nathanael said. Jesus answered, I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you. Then Nathanael declared, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. So again, they, as I say, very much like the letters of the living in the Baha'i faith and the first followers of Baha'u'llah as well. They are simple. These are very simple people, but they have this incredible purity of spirit. Now, what did I just do? Hold on. All right. These are the 12 disciples. I'm not going to go over each of them, but something you might want to do is to look in the encyclopedia or on Wikipedia and see that each one of them, so far as we know, died pretty horribly. Peter was crucified upside down because he didn't think he was worthy to be crucified the way that Christ was. Paul was beheaded, and so on. Now, Paul was, as I say, not one of the original disciples, but all of them ended up being killed for their beliefs. What is the religious context? Now, we've dealt with this already to a certain extent. We were talking about Judaism, both its ascendance and its decline. But you need to understand that even though they had been conquered by Rome and were under Roman rule, they also were allowed to have their own courts, though the Romans would carry out the decisions of the court. So there are several groups that contest the assertions of Christ and his followers. The Pharisees are the principal ones. They saw themselves as a separate group of people. They were above the common people and saw that the common people, kept to the religious laws. Scribes, they're another group that quarrel or argue with Christ. Scribes could interpret and regulate Jewish laws, but they did not interfere with or assume any role in the guidance of the people. The Pharisees claimed Mosaic authority for their interpretation of Jewish laws, while the Sadducees, another group, represented the authority of the priestly privileges and prerogatives established since the days of Solomon. And then there are the Essenes, who were primarily Samaritan Jews. Now you see here, since the Second Temple was built around 400 and some years before Christ, and it was standing during the time of Christ. It was destroyed about 100 years afterward. And so when he throws the money changers out of the temple and so on, it's talking about the second temple. The Sanhedrin is the governing body, if you will, of the sacred law. They make the decisions of judgment when someone is brought before them. So in the Second Temple period, the period in which Christ appears, the great Sanhedrin met in the temple in Jerusalem in a building called the Hall of Hewn Stones. The great Sanhedrin convened every day except festivals and the Sabbath day. The great Sanhedrin was finally disbanded 425 Common Era. That means after the birth of Christ. Think not. Now, this becomes very important because here you're going to have two things for the rest of the presentation. One is Christ saying, I'm not come here to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. But I'm going to give you some new laws to abrogate some and to abolish others and to update others and to bring you other laws that you haven't had before. Now, most Christians aren't aware or don't pay much attention to that because most Christians you meet are Protestant, and the Protestant denominations believe in accepting Christ on faith alone, and that works do not earn you salvation. This is a big point that we will deal with a little later in the presentation, but mostly we'll deal with it next time. So this passage, very important. And this is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, which is probably the most famous talk that Christ gives. And it contains the laws. Most of the laws that he gives are in that sermon. And he begins by saying, think not that I've come to destroy the law or the prophets. In other words, I'm not against Judaism or Judaic law. I've not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle in no wise shall pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. And of course, that's a very loaded phrase there, till all be fulfilled, because probably from a Baha'i point of view, we think that means until the day we're living in now, until the world becomes a complete under one religion and understands the whole process. So he goes on to say, whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments and shall teach men to break them, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, of course, he's not only denigrating the scribes and Pharisees as being hypocrites, but he's also saying the only way you are, again, this term salvation becomes tossed around very heavily later on in the letters of Paul. Christ does not use it very much, but he does talk about entering the kingdom of heaven. And he talks obviously here that the only way you will do it is by obedience to the law. Now, this is very similar to what Baha'u'llah says in the Kitab Agdan, where he says, Kitab Agdan, the Book of Certitude. Once in about 1,000 years shall this city, now this is the city of certitude, be renewed and be readorned. Wherefore, O my friend, it behooveth us to exert the highest endeavor to attain unto that city, and by the grace of God and his loving kindness, rend asunder the veils of glory, so that with inflexible steadfastness we may sacrifice our drooping souls in the path of the new beloved, the new manifestation. So that city, he goes on to say here at the bottom, that city is none other than the word of God revealed in every age and dispensation. The law is part of that then. He begins the Sermon on the Mount with the statement that you are the light of the world, you my followers. And he goes on to say that a city that is set on a hill cannot be hid, neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So again, this great emphasis on deeds. Let your faith be demonstrated in your actions and your comportment. And so here are the laws, and I'm not going to show you, go over them. There are 25 of them that I have listed in the following verses from the 5th chapter of Matthew. And they're very similar in content and even in wording in some cases to the hidden words. And in the handout that I have made for you that you can look at and download, you will be able to see some comments I put in referring to some of the hidden words that parallel these. So for example, this one up here, judge not the sins of others so long as thou art thyself a sinner. Judge not that ye be judged. Here's another one. When you teach the faith, first find a receptive ear and loving heart. That's my words, but he states it imagistically. Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast your pearls before swine. In other words, find someone worthy of hearing the message. All right, another important thing insofar as the future of Christianity is concerned, a crucial thing, is the fact that Christ appoints Peter as the successor after his death. Now, this is disputed by some, but it becomes the basis of the first church, which is the Catholic Church, becomes the Roman Catholic Church after the church splits from the Eastern Catholic Church, which occurs about 400 years after Christ. So when Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, whom do men say that I am, the Son of Man am? And they said, some say thou art John the Baptist, some say Elias, and some say Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. And he saith unto them, but whom say ye that I am? And Simon Peter answered and said, thou art the Christ, meaning the anointed one, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered and said to him, blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. In other words, God has spoken to you, God. And you'll see in the book of Acts that Peter does many performs many miracles and healing and raising from the dead and so on. So he has great power if we are to believe all that is said in the book of Acts. I say also unto thee that thou art Peter, and of course that means in Greek Petra, and it means rock. And upon this rock I will build my church. So you have a double entendre there. It goes on, the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give thee the keys of the kingdom. And whosoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. In other words, he seems to give him the ability to make law and change law. At least that's how I interpret it. Another thing that we've already mentioned last time, and that is the frequent use of bread imagery. We mentioned this when we were talking about imagery in the prophets. And nothing particularly needful of me to go over this with you. You can understand it quite clearly, except what's very interesting is that he's using this analogy that I am the bread of life come down from heaven. They said, what sign do you have? And he said, I am the bread of life come down from heaven. Jesus said, he that cometh to me shall never hunger. He that believeth in me shall never thirst. So this imagery he uses frequently, but the most interesting one to me is this. The Jews say to him, okay, our father Moses gave us manna in the wilderness. Can you do that? In other words, can you perform such a miracle? And he said, your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness, and they are dead. This is the bread which cometh down from heaven, that a man may eat thereof and not die. In other words, what I am giving you is a spiritual nourishment. Any man eats of this bread shall live forever, and that bread I will give is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. And of course, he's talking metaphorically here, no doubt foreshadowing his own crucifixion. Now notice the Jews therefore strove among themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? So they really don't get it. They really don't understand what he's talking about. And of course, his followers do. And of course, this whole idea, whoso eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood hath eternal life. He's not talking about literally, but this is the same image he will use at the Last Supper when he effectively creates the sacrament of the Eucharist, which is the most sacred sacrament in the Roman Catholic Church. Now, in the book of John, and that's what Johnine discourses, that's what that means. In the book of John, you have a whole bunch of things clarified in a very important way. The concept of the manifestation is made clear, because one of the critical problems in Christianity becomes, who is Christ? Is he God in the flesh? Is he not God, but the same essence as God? Or is he just another prophet or an apostle of God? And of course, this is when I said before how much more the Christian scripture meant to me when I went back to it as a Baha'i, because suddenly I understood what he meant when he said, if you see me, you see God. He didn't mean he was God, but the perfect mirror image that we used about the second class. So in the Johnine discourses in the book of John, he talks about his going away, but he will return again. He says, I am the way, no one comes unto the Father but by me. That's something that causes a great deal of chauvinism in Christianity. If he is the way, then no one else is the way. You see God in me and God and me in God, which would sound like that they're one and the same. And then he goes on to say, I am but a vine, and my Father is the vine dresser, which means they are essentially different entities or essences. And he goes on to say, you are the branches, my followers, and the works you do are the fruit you bear. And from that fruit comes the wine, and the choice wine, which is the new revelation, must needs have a new wine skin to be contained, a new institution. And so a new institution must be devised. There's the next problem in Christianity. Christ does not design an institution. He appoints Peter. He tells his disciples to go and teach the word to all the world, which they do faithfully. But the formation of the church, such as it is, occurs in several different ways, which is why you have sectarianism very early in the Christian church. Another image that's very important in the teachings of Christ is the image of the Good Shepherd. Beautiful, beautiful words here, and it relates back to both the, well, to the 23rd Psalm, which we will see in a couple of slides here. He says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. But he that is an hireling, in other words, someone who's you hire to do the job, but is not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth. And the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth, because he is an hireling, and careth not for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and am known of mine. As the Father knoweth me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for my sheep, for the sheep. And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring. And they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life that I might take it again. And here comes a passage I put in yellow for a very important reason. He says, no man taketh it from me, but I lay it down myself. And but here in the Elizabethan King James Version means except, unless I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again, meaning I don't have to allow myself to be crucified. I can stop it at any point. I have that power. So no man takes my life from me. I lay down my life, but no one can take it from me unless I do it of my own free will. And this is very, of course, very reminiscent of this passage from Baha'u'llah. The ancient beauty hath consented to be bound with chains, that mankind may be released from its bondage, and hath accepted to be made a prisoner within this most mighty stronghold, that the whole world may attain unto true liberty. Now we get to a critical point that I've already mentioned, and that's ontology, which means the nature of being of Christ, which has a field of study unto itself called Christology, the study of the nature of Christ. What was he? Was he God, essentially God? And it was this question that really tore the church in two, particularly between the Eastern and Western church. And here's where the analogy of the perfect mirror is so important. As you will see, Christ responding to this question about, you keep talking about the Father, as Thomas says, but we don't know where you're going, and you keep saying you're going to the Father. Show us the Father so that we'll know what you're talking about. So how can we know the way, says Thomas? And this is where you have this very important passage to Christians. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me, except by me. Now, if you take that out of context, you would say, well, that means that Christianity is the only pathway to God by following Christ. And of course, all of the manifestations say this exact same thing, and it's all true, because at the time they say it, they are the way, because they are the manifestation for that dispensation. And then he gets into this ontology. If you had known me, you should have known my Father also, and from henceforth ye know him and have seen him. Again, very crucial. You see me, you see God. The authoritative Baha'i texts say this over and over again. Of course, Baha'u'llah says in the Gan, if they, in the state of essential unity in that station, if they say, I am God, in that sense, they are telling the truth. So Philip saith unto him, Lord, show us the Father, and it sufficeth us. Just let us see him. And Jesus said, have I been with you so long, and yet hast thou not known me, Philip? He that hath seen me hath seen the Father. And how sayest thou then, show us the Father? Believest thou not that I am in the Father, and the Father in me? The words that, and here's where he gives them a clue that he's not the Father. He says, the words that I speak unto you, I speak not of myself, meaning from myself, but the Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. And over again, he says this throughout the scriptures, I do nothing on my own authority, but by the authority of him who sent me. Believe that I am in the Father and the Father in me. But if you don't understand that, just follow me because of the works. In other words, because of what I can do, which is a very profound thing, I think. And then in that same, little later in John, following this, you have this concept of the Comforter who will come. It says, be glad that I'm going away, because if I don't come away, then God can't send you the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, and he shall teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said unto you. And of course, Muhammad does precisely that. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. In other words, I'm not going to give you the kind of peace that the world, kind of material peace, you're going to have a very troubled life, but you will have a spiritual peace. And here in 14:28 in John, ye have heard how I have said unto you, I go away and come again unto you. If you loved me, if you would rejoice, because I said I go into the Father. For my Father is greater than I. That's a clear distinction that Christ makes between his essential reality and that of God. And now I have told you before it come to pass, that when it is come to pass, you might believe. And he says, I can't talk much more because my time has come. But that the world may know that I love the Father, and as the Father gave me commandment, even so I do. Arise and go hence. And that's the end of that session with his disciples. So I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away, and every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth, that it may, and that purgeth, there's another, in the more modern versions, he pruneth. In other words, if you prune a fruit tree, it puts forth more fruit. And of course, that signifies you will be tested. And the more you're tested, the more fruit you will bear. Now you are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you. And so abide in me and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine. And that's very powerful. It means this has to do with the covenant, as we would understand it. And of course, we use the same imagery, that the Agsan and the Afnan. The Abdul Baha is the most great branch. But if the branch breaks off from the tree, or then it has no more life, and so that's the symbol of the covenant. I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. Without me, you can do nothing. And then we've done this passage before. And if you don't abide in me, you will dry up and you'll be fit for the fire. We're not going to do anything much with the miracles of Christ. There are a bunch of them. There are 34 in all. But like Baha'u'llah, Christ does not emphasize them as a proof of his station, though most Christians do. And it's understandable that they would. Who else can do such things as this? The best example of his attitude about them comes after his feeding of the 5,000, which is one of the miracles, where he turns a few crumbs of bread and a few fishes into sufficiency to feed all of the 5,000 people. But when he feeds them, he flees because he sees they want to crown him king. Therefore they gathered them together and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, "This is of a truth that prophet that should come into the world." When Jesus therefore perceived they would come and take him by force to make him king, he departed again into the mountain himself alone. So why does he do that? Well, he explains it, and he says, basically, don't follow me because of the miracles. Labor not, he says, for the meat which perishes, but for that meat which endureth unto everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you. For him hath God the Father sealed. Then they said, what shall we do that we might work the works of God? And he says, this is the work of God, that ye believe on him who hath sent. Yes, sent. Now, if you stop there, you'd think, well, that's all you need to do to be saved, is to believe on him. But of course, we just read earlier all the things where he said, it's not enough to believe. You've got to demonstrate your belief with works. And again, next week, we'll discuss how important that becomes. The Last Supper, they were preparing for the feast of the Passover. He tells them, my time is at hand, meaning they're going to take me and crucify me. I mean, it's here, of course, he tells them that one of you is going to betray me. And they all are aghast. And each one says, is it I? Is it I? And of course, Judas, who would betray him, answered and said, Master, is it I? And he said unto him, thou hast said, which is translated in the modern version, yes, it is you. Yes, you've got that, you are correct. And so he gives them the wine to drink, and he says, for this is my blood of the New Testament, or New Covenant, which is shed for the remission of the sins. So the bread is my body, he says.